Thank you, Father Meyer. Ladies and gentlemen, I have with us here Mrs. Sarindhorn Mativachranon.
Your Grace, Reverend Fathers, brothers and sisters in Christ. สวัสดีค่ะ Even though today is the last day of our conference, may I say, welcome to Thailand. It is indeed gratifying to see so many bishops, priests, brothers and sisters gathered here in Thailand to glorify Jesus' divine mercy. As a convert of only 16 years, I stand before you a humble servant of God, whose life was engulfed in God's compassion and mercy. Please allow me to share with you my real life story. My topic is a life reborn. I was born the youngest daughter of my family, whose parents were devout people. My mother especially would worship all things she thought were sacred, ranging from the moon to statues. Fortunately, they sent 3 daughters to Catholic girls' school for their education. I was their youngest child. After graduation from high school here, I went to the United States of America and came back with an honors degree in business administration in 1969. I was immediately offered a job by Thailand's first finance and securities company as its first female marketing officer. With hard work and outstanding performance, I was asked by the president of one of the largest commercial banks then to co-found its affiliated company 5 years later and became the first managing director of that company. At the age of 25, I was the youngest female top executive in the finance circle at that time. 5 more years later, my boss wanted to retire. And with assistance from another financier, I bought up all his shares. At the age of 30, I was at the top of the world. Then lightning struck. Less than a year after I took over the company, the stock exchange of Thailand crashed for the first time. People faith in the financial institutions and began to withdraw money from finance and securities companies. It was like a person bleeding to death. I tried all I could, but finally decided to sell my shares back to the bank of my former chairman at a tremendous loss. I was willing to sacrifice myself in exchange for the safety of the money of the depositors, many of whom were Catholic schools. Having brought the ship back safely to shore, I was totally exhausted and wanted to rest. I resigned. Before I took leave, something unimaginable happened. I was held against my will in a meeting room by a bank director for 7 hours, forced to sign some papers. Seeing that it was not ethical, I steadfastly refused. From 4 p.m. to 11 p.m., I was denied any food nor drinks. When the director who held me captive finally had to let me go, he pointed his finger at me. "One day you'll be sorry." Little did I know that what I did or did not do that day would cost me 2 decades of my life. Later, this man became the new chairman of the company, and he was true to his words. One day, I got the shock of my life when I was tipped off that an arrest warrant was on the way for me for embezzling a staggering amount of 196 million baht. A former employee of mine, whose wedding was officiated by me, was willing to give false testimonies to police for exchange of a promotion. While all accused were presumed innocent until proven guilty in court, I could be jailed rotten if I could not produce enough bail. Where could I obtain that amount of money for bail? I had no choice. Leaving my 4 children and husband behind, I took the first plane out of Bangkok the next morning. As soon as the plane took off, I buried my face in my hand and cried, "God, I'm innocent. I'm innocent." My life from that point on was like that of the doctor played by Harrison Ford in the movie The Fugitive. Fearing I might be arrested, I moved from one place to another, sometimes eating just 1 meal a day. At night, I would be too scared to sleep. My life as a pitiful fugitive went on until December 25th, 1989. The previous night, I was awake the whole night, and the next morning, I went to sleep late, waking up around 7 p.m. on December 25th. I was starved. It was pitch dark outside, very cold, and it was raining. When I came back to my tiny room empty-handed, because all shops and restaurants were closed, I was hungry and very angry. I became hysterical and started cursing the director who put me through this kind of suffering, and the lawyer, and the false witness, who were both my previous employees. I must have temporarily gone insane at that point and saw my life less worthy than the dust on the floor. I ran around my tiny room looking for something, a knife, a rope, anything that could end my miserable being. When I could not find any, I knelt down in the middle of the floor and cried out to the Lord, "Dear God, I do not know what sin I committed in my last life, but I can't go on living anymore. Please come and take me to be with you." At that time, I wasn't baptized yet, but throughout my ordeal, I prayed feverishly night and day to God for His help. I did not know how long I was kneeling there, but was jolted awake when a thought flashed into my mind without my awareness. It was like someone had spoken to me. "Don't give up, my child. One day the truth will prevail. God has a mission for you." I jumped up from the floor. Did someone just speak to me? Or was I hallucinating? There was no one in the room except me. Then it dawned on me that though I was suffering beyond any words, I was still free, wasn't I? And it seemed that whenever I thought I came to the end of the rope, there would be some deprived. There couldn't be any other explanation. It must be God who was taking care of me and had just spoken to me. I kneeled down again and prayed, "Dear God, if it's you who had just spoken to me, I would be and do whatever you want me to. Then I prostrated. Just as I did that, a righteous thought came into my mind. If I was to continue living, I must first forgive. But how? Only moments ago, I was cussing them to death. After trying the whole night, I prayed again. Dear God, I want to forgive my enemies, but I cannot do it on my own. Please help me be able to do so. What happened next was something I would never forget the rest of my life. As soon as I finished my prayers, the feeling of hatred in my heart, like a fire in the desert, was blown away. Instead, a breeze of coolness, like the first fall of snow, swept through my heart. It was wonderful. I felt redeemed and refreshed. I know immediately a miracle had happened. God had touched my soul with His love. I was able to forgive my enemies through His blessing. I was ecstatic and cried the tears of joy and excitement the whole night. Later, I even prayed for God's blessings for all three of my enemies and their families. I was to remain living the life of a fugitive in exile until the statute of limitations expired before I could return to Thailand. Though I could not be arrested on criminal charges, I was sued in the civil court as well. The chairman was bent to get me dead or alive. I had to attend lengthy court sessions. When one lawyer after another demanded to charge me millions of baht for lawyer fees, I suddenly realized that I had God. Why did I need any lawyer? My faith was so strong that I could call it blind faith at that time. I dismissed my lawyer and went to court defending myself. Realizing that God helped those who help themselves only, I decided to head back to my former company to petition for justice. Another uphill battle had just begun. Having been the top boss of the company, I was reduced to being just an ex-con woman. Nobody would see me. I would go there in the morning, day after day, hoping to get an appointment with someone. Everyone ignored and shunned me. The humiliation was so heart-wrenching that at times I thought I could not go on. However, I did not get discouraged. If I did, I would turn to ashes. I prayed vehemently with my unconditional faith till one Monday, on January 17, 1994, as usual, I went to see the director of the legal department of my former company. Ignoring his secretary's refusal for me, I barged into his room and presented him with a list of documents I said would prove my innocence. Shaking his head, he said, "I'm sorry, it has been 14 years. All documents have been destroyed." Without premeditation, I blurted out, "Then let me go and search your storeroom myself." Nothing could be more absurd than that statement. However, all things are possible with God. Mark chapter 10, verse 27. Accompanied by 5 of the company staff, I was allowed to go to the specially built and well-guarded storage of the company. The legal director gave the permission so that he could rid himself of me, the nuisance, once and for all. Within only 2 hours, however, I was able to dig out the documents that would prove my innocence beyond any doubts. One of my other staff was instructed to destroy them long time ago. For some reason, she did not, even though she lied to the chairman that she did. The board of directors learned of the evidence at the next board meeting. They were stunned and speechless. One of them remarked, "We have killed an innocent woman." Their resolution was to withdraw the case from the civil court immediately and also asked me not to sue back. On March 21st, 1994, I walked out of the court for the last time as an innocent person. Even the sky cried tears of joy for me. It rained the whole morning. Remembering that I was able to forgive all those who wrongly accused me because of God's grace on the night of December 25th, 1989, I decided not to sue back for any amount of money, though I could have sued or could have asked for millions of baht in damages. To family members who could not understand my action, I simply said, "It's between me and God." And so it ended. So had everything. To most people, including my husband at that time, my nightmare was over. I should just forget everything and get on with my life. But I told my husband that I was not a tap that could be turned on and off. To me, the fight for justice had ended. So I had the purpose of living. I was a wounded woman who needed healing. Suddenly, it was an empty world around me. For the past decade, I told myself I could not die before I was able to find justice. Now that my name was cleared, where was justice? There were no announcements in any newspapers. I was still a social outcast, forgotten by most and shunned by all. All my former colleagues were then top financial executives. I was almost penniless and jobless. I could not even read business newspapers without crying. Suddenly, my previous determination and courage all but disappeared. The only feeling I had left was self-pity. I had lost the will to live again. I used to read stories of prisoners of war killing themselves upon returning home. Why, I wondered. They endured torture in their captivity, yet ended their lives once they were free. I was then facing the same psychological trauma like that of a prisoner of war upon returning home. As if the cross I was carrying was not heavy enough, an extra weight was added onto my shoulders. Not understanding that I desperately needed him to help me heal, my husband walked out of our family. I was left to care for my 4 children alone. My life at that point was like a beautiful porcelain vase being thrown to the floor, then stomped upon by a strong rock man. There was nothing left but pieces strewn on the floor. Whenever they saw me cry,